This is my wood stove. It keeps us warm in the winter. For those of you who don't know, wood stoves have air controls that allow you to open up the damper. It feeds more air into it and makes it burn hotter, and you can shut it down to help it burn less. Hooked up to this, I have a Raspberry Pi, an infrared temperature sensor, much like you would have in a forehead thermometer. It's got about kind of a 90-degree field of view. The wood stove, it's a US Stove 1100E. This comes with a blower wheel built into it. That blower wheel, it doesn't have any temperature control. It's just got a knob, basically on-off speed. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to be able to turn this fan off and on depending on how high it gets. Sometimes you can use the fan to help cool it down, but if the stove is starting, if the fire's going out, you don't want your fan cooling it down anymore. So my Raspberry Pi in here helps me control that. In this little tackle box to kind of keep the dust off of it, you can see the temperature sensor, how it gets wired into some of the I/O pins on it. But sitting on top of it, it's got a relay board. I'm only using one right now, but basically that controls, that gives the Raspberry Pi the ability to turn the fan off and on. And all of that is fed into a web interface here. This is just, the Raspberry Pi is running Ruby on Rails, and that's responsible for logging the temperature and controlling everything. So I've got just real basically here, I've got a button to turn the fan off and on. And I've got a chart here at the top that shows me the temperature. I do a little bit of, I don't know, what's the word? Not quite smoothing, extrapolation. Sometimes looking at the rate of change and some different, I don't know, rules that I came up with to try to approximate the surface temperature of the stove versus the internal temperature of the stove. And then you can see in these dotted lines, I've got some temperature limits. So let's say right now the stove is, it's not super hot. So within my old analog little thermo, I wish I knew the word for it. Anyways, it's a thermometer. It's in the best zone, but it's a little on the cool side. So I'm gonna open up the damper to let this thing get kind of hot. And that's gonna take a few minutes. So I gave it a few minutes, and you can see the temperature is climbing up here. There's actually the point. You can see where I opened the damper, and now the temperature is climbing up a good bit. And it's so it's getting into that orange zone, and it's approaching these two temperature monitors that I've defined, 575 and 525. And what happens there, that's roughly the zone where the stove really likes to be. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. The fire, it's burning well, the fire's not going out, but you're not getting up into that red zone where you're wasting a lot of heat going up your chimney. But the tricky thing is, wood stoves can be a little fickle. As winds come by, as your wood shifts around, depending on how much you packed it, there's lots of things. That temperature, sometimes it gets out of that happy range. And what this does is it gives me a feedback loop. As the temperature crosses that upper boundary, I've defined this temperature monitor to have the fan connected to it. So when the temperature crosses that 575 degree mark, the fan is going to turn off. And then likewise, when it goes back below 525, the fan will turn off. And it's all pretty basic. I really haven't put a lot into the look and feel of it, but this is the page I have to modify these temperature monitors. So here's my the one I was talking about that turns my fan off and on. So I can edit it, turn it off and on. I can also have it send me notifications. And what's helpful about that, I can have another temperature monitor up at 650. So if it's just getting way too hot, my phone will notify me in the middle of the night to say, hey, you need to do something, close the damper a little bit further, put some water on top of the stove, put a fan on it, something, cool it off. Because if it gets way too hot, you can risk a creosote fire. But pretty soon, pause it for a second, we're about to see it cross over into that zone where the fan will turn on. All right, so here we are. Come on, Raspberry Pi. Get across it. There we go. So yeah, the fan turned itself on. And it's going to take a long time to demonstrate, but basically that gives it a feedback loop, and it will keep itself in a happy range. So I can also open up Pushbullet. So I can't show you on my phone, but this would be this is the notification that it would have just sent to my phone. So it tells me what the temperature is and what have you. So yeah, it's pretty neat. I can go back and see the last 2 hours, the last 10 hours, that kind of thing. And so you can see around here, my wood stove got up to that range. The fan kicked on. It cooled itself off, so the fan turned off and then came back up, and eventually the fan turned on. What was that? I don't know, like 20-30 minutes later. So it regulates itself. It's pretty nice. You can see the page refreshes itself every minute. There's a Rails gem that has a kind of a background cron job that records the temperature every minute and feeds it into the SQLite database. It all runs on the little Raspberry Pi here, so it doesn't need any internet connection. Although in order to access this web page, I'm just hitting a local IP address. And if I want push notifications overnight, I have to hope it's a night that my ISP isn't doing maintenance. But yeah, that's my wood stove. It's pretty cool. Kind of doesn't quite bring this into the 21st century, but I mean it's helpful. Sometimes it saves me having to get up in the middle of the night, or if it is getting up into that red zone, I realize when it's up here rather than burning the house down. So there we go.